Hey there, it's Savanna here from Olivia's Catastrophe, and today I'm here to give you my April reading wrap-up. In the month of April I read 12 books and I'm here to tell you all about them. I'll have content warnings in the description box down below if that's something you might need, and without further ado, let's get right down to the books that I read in April. So we're going to start out with a disappointment, and that is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield, which has a gorgeous cover and it sounded like it was going to be something I loved, but unfortunately it did not work for me. So this one is about these two women who are married, and one of them is a deep sea diver and she goes on a deep sea diving trip. It goes completely wrong and she resurfaces months or like weeks later, but she's not the same when she returns to her wife. And it's told from both of their perspectives, one of which is about Leah while she's under the sea and what has happened there, and then we go into Mary's timeline, the present day, where she's kind of realizing what is up with Leah and how she feels about it. And a bit of the disappointment that I felt for this one is my fault. I did think it was going to be a bit more science fiction-y, a bit more science fiction, gothic and horror than it truly was. It very firmly felt like it fell into the literary fiction canon for me, and I just feel like it was really lovely writing, but it went nowhere. I didn't really feel anything for either of the characters. I think Leah's chapters that were in the past were just too short for me to get a good grip on what her character was like, and then if you're in the present day timeline where you're seeing her through Mary's eyes, I think she's just a bit too absent and a bit too ghostly, which I guess you could say is quite gothic of it, but just a bit too absent for me to really get a firm grip on what her character was like. As for Mary, she has her own character and you hear a lot of her perspective, but she's so all consumed by her relationship and what the status of her relationship is at the moment and what it was like before, that I don't really feel like I saw her between all of that. It was so much about the relationship and how obsessive and all-encompassing that it was, that we don't see Mary. And I guess you could argue with me and say that in some ways that's what this book is about. It's about a relationship that's so reliant on each other, one that's so molten lava that nothing else can come outside of it, but at the same time I feel like it was just boring. It was boring. That was the issue. It was written well, but it was boring. When I say written well, I mean writing style. I don't mean character development. And while it has some themes that it's playing with here, it was just a bit clumsy. Like, it tried to force in a grief storyline with an echo of another grief storyline, and that echo was just not developed enough for it to be effective and truly be an echo. It just felt a bit too randomly thrown in. And then the grieving storyline in real life was just so murky with the relationship and the romantic feelings that I was just like, what do you want me to have as the outcome of this? And don't even get me started on outcomes, because this situation with the deep sea dive and what really happened, like, there was so much suspense and build up and atmosphere and it went absolutely nowhere. So the outcome of that storyline was disappointing, and I think that fed into the disappointment that I felt with the outcome of the contemporary storyline. So ultimately, no matter which way I look at this, whether it's characters, whether it's suspense build up, whether it's symbolism and metaphor, I'm just disappointed, and that's how I felt with this book. And it was so beautiful in terms of cover, in terms of writing, and it just didn't deliver in terms of anything else. Oh no. Okay, I think I put all of my disappointing reads first, but this was like okay. So this is The Four Winds by Kristin Hannah. I've read two other Kristin Hannah books now and I've really enjoyed those first two. I thought they were fantastic and blew me away. But this one I felt quite mediocre about it. And this is The Four Winds, so we're following Elsa, and she finally finds the family that she's been longing for. She finally finds somewhere that she can call home, but it's based on farming, and a massive drought happens and it dries up her farm, and she's trying to hold everything together, hold her family together, hold the farm together, but the drought is really soaking everything up, and they kind of end up in a refugee situation. And this is based on a true story of a drought that was really awful, and it meant everybody had to kind of move to where there was possibility of work. I was just like, Kristin Hannah knows how to write really good characters and she knows how to write compelling stories, because I've read them in the past, but this one, it just felt boring. And I think it had to do with the fact that there's only so much you can do with a drought, and I felt like the characters' actions got quite repetitive. And while I do think sometimes her books have been repetitive before, I've been absolutely fine with it because I felt like the characters and the nature of the story carried things, but here I don't actually think it did. I think the drought just ended up being for want of a better word, dry in terms of storyline, and just a bit too boring for it to carry a 400-page book. 400 pages for this story was a bit too long with the way that the drought just continued and continued and continued. I did like Elsa as a main character. I felt like she was really, really believable, and you get to see her from quite young to like quite grown up, and seeing that trajectory of her life, it just felt so realistic. Again, it was just a character that I truly believed in, and you get to see her family, whether that's her true family or the family that she finds for herself along her years, and I really liked all of those secondary characters. I felt all of them were very believable and very real. I just had such good characters, but then the story was just so dry, and by the time you got to the end of the story, I had the feeling that the author didn't quite know where she wanted to put the story, so she ended it abruptly, and she ended it abruptly in a way that I think will impact some readers, but it didn't impact me because it just felt like a I don't know where to end this book, but I've written 400 pages and I need to end it somewhere kind of ending. So I can see why this one works for some people, but for me it just wasn't my favourite of hers. That's not to say that I didn't like it. I still think it's an okay book, and I will be reading more Kristin Hannah in the future. It just wasn't a number one for me. We have Bloom by Kevin Panetta and Savanna Ganucheau, and this is a graphic novel. It's got a cool colour palette, so it's a lot of blues, and we're following this young boy who works in his family's bakery. He really doesn't like helping out, he really doesn't like working there, and he feels kind of stuck. He wants to be in a band with his friends, and his parents say, sure, you can go and move with your friends to pursue music. You've just got to find someone to replace you at the bakery. And cue in this lovely cinnamon roll person who turns up and starts working at the bakery, and a romance starts to ensue. So I've been hearing this one described as Heartstopper meets Chef's Kiss, and I think those are both fantastic graphic novels, and both of them do everything that this book is trying to do, but so much better. This one really just, I didn't get along with our main character. I think he was really selfish, and I think in certain ways he was really mean, and I think that's all fun and good to have an unlikable character, but if you want me to root for them and to be satisfied with the ending, they need to do some growing, and I don't think it happened. I don't think our main character grew, and I feel like everybody forgave him for things that he did without him having to face any real consequences, and I really didn't like that. I think some of the secondary characters were quite mean, and they never had to apologise. Sure, some of them are meant to be mean for the story's sake. I'm not talking about those. Other ones who didn't really apologise when they should have, I'm very unhappy about that. Another element to this book that's supposed to be really cute is the baking, and I love books that have baking and cooking in them, and I've realised I actually really like it in graphic novels. I've read quite a few now, and I think it was nice here, but it still wasn't my favourite, and I think that suffered because of the fact that it was a colour palette, that it was all those cool blues, because in Chef's Kiss it's a full colour one, and seeing all the baking and the food in full colour just made it feel more real and delicious and unattainable, because I'm reading a book and I can't eat it, but it made that element of it stand out to me more, whereas here it just felt like the bread was in cool blue, like it didn't appeal to me as much, so I think it suffered for its colour palette, which is really strange for me to say because I usually love when a graphic novel has a colour palette. What I will say though is that the love interest in this one, he is just so sweet, he is perfect. I really enjoyed his character and how much he was guarding his own heart and doing things that were best for him. I admire that in a love story, so seeing his character was really nice, and he just deserved better than the main character. I think he should have been with someone else. I think sometimes when I read backlist books I realise that they might have been good at the time, but we have better now, and that's how I feel about Bloom. But I was in the mood for more graphic novels. There's going to be some more in this wrap up, so I read Check Please by Ngozi Ukazu, and this one is a really cute graphic novel that totally won me over. So it's about this young man I should say, and he goes to university, and he used to do figure skating, but when he goes to university he switches into doing ice hockey, where there are some overlapping skills but there are others that he still needs to learn, and he's very scared of being checked, which is this thing that happens in ice hockey. And he also loves to bake. Yes, he does. So you can see what I was in the mood for last month, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. So he's also a YouTuber, so it's almost like the perspective of this story is where he's vlogging his experiences of moving to university, of getting into the team, of getting to know each other, and falling more and more in love with ice hockey. And in the beginning it kind of annoyed me because the chapters are so episodic. It's like watching a YouTube video, and it means that it cuts off and you don't see behind the scenes what happens when when the camera's not rolling. And I was like, I want to know what's happening behind the scenes. I want to see those moments. But the further you get into the book, the more you do see behind the scenes. So it actually warmed up more and more for me. My patrons can attest to this. When I was reading this on the live show, I was giggling and smiling and laughing because it's just so cute and it's just so adorable. I think books that have team sports in them are just so sweet because you get the found family vibe, and I love seeing him meet the team and just judging them at face value, but then getting to know them and kind of falling into the friendship as well. I do think it was really interesting because I would say that the love interest is the one who has more character development than the main character, because the main character is already a cinnamon roll that we all adore, but his love interest has a lot to work through in terms of his competitive nature and in terms of like figuring out what he really wants in life. So it was kind of nice to see the love interest having so much character development for once. And then the baking stuff was cute, the art style and the colours were really like cute and everything, and I had a very good time. It ends on like not a cliffhanger, but kind of a cliffhanger, and I really want to read the second volume. I will say that this book has a lot of extra scenes, like scenes that were not included in the main book, and I read them all and I was like, why aren't they including it in the main book? Because it actually made things in the main storyline make more sense. So I feel like they should have just been integrated into the story, but it's fine, you can read them after, they're in volume 1, and so I got to experience them anyway. The only extras that I didn't read were the tweets, and that's because why would I read someone's tweets if I'm not on Twitter anyway? So I just didn't read the tweets, but all of the extra scenes I think are really worth reading, and I had a good time with Check Please. It fulfilled the wholesome, sweet kind of book that I needed in my life at that time. I devoured non-fiction in April, and so we're going to get to some of those now. So the first one I want to talk about is None of the Above by Alabanza, which is on the Jalak Prize shortlist, and I really enjoyed this one. So it's a collection of essays, and Alabanza is trans, they're non-binary, and they are responding to things that people have said to them about themselves and writing essays about that. So I'm going to give you some examples. So when did you know? But I mean proper trans. This ain't a thing we do around here, son. So it's different things like that that they're responding to, and reading these essays just gave me a much better understanding of what non-binary really means and what that encapsulates, what that looks like to some people. And when I say some people, like how that is manifested by the people who identify as non-binary. And it's not like I didn't know what non-binary was, but I think the more books you read about identity, just the better, because you better understand different people. No one person is a monolith, no one definition fits all, and non-binary kind of encapsulates that sentence, no one definition fits all. And I really kind of saw that and understood that and internalized that in a way that I can't describe when I read this book. Of course, there are things that are outrageous that happen in here. Some of Alabanza's experiences are not okay. People should not be that way. People should not be that horrible. But it was harrowing and important to read it, to understand, to be able to better defend, to be able to fight against those kind of actions, to be aware that they are happening. And I just think Alabanza writes in such a way that really clearly states what they mean. They get their point across, but they get their point across in a way that's academic, in a way of you can see the points that they're trying to make, that they want you to understand, but in a way that also doesn't remove the emotion. It's not an essay that is, it's a personal essay, that's what I'm trying to say. It brings the emotion, but it also brings the facts, it also brings the experience. And I just think it's one of those books that's really important for everyone to read. It's really not that long, it's really worth you reading, and it was just truly fantastic. I hope it wins the Jalak Prize. I haven't read any of the other shortlistees, but I still hope it wins. In April, it was also the Disability Readathon, which is one that ever since it was created I've participated in every April, so I definitely tried to read at least one disability book. And so one of the books that I read was Just Saying by Malorie Blackman. I was very excited to read this. It's Malorie Blackman's memoir. She is an author and she wrote the Noughts and Crosses series, which is a groundbreaking series for me in my personal reading journey, but just for the UK in general, I think. So getting to read her memoir was amazing, and When you read books like Noughts and Crosses, you know that that author has had things happen to them in their life, but I did not know the sheer amount of stuff that Malorie Blackman has experienced and had to put up with. It outraged me. I was so angry reading this book. I was angry, I was emotional. So Malorie Blackman grows up and she talks about what it means to be essentially homeless. She talks about what it means to face racism in a very intense and real way, and in the way that in which she defies the racism and the blocks and limits that people try to put on not only her as a person but also her writing. Malorie Blackman is disabled in that she has sickle cell anemia, and she talks about the ways in which the medical system was quite racist towards her. Not only in terms of the disability that comes with sickle cell anemia, but also in terms of the treatment to black women in hospitals. And I think that was the part that really got to me, because I did not know that she had this whole medical history and this whole encounter of racism within the medical system that was just so apparent. And I think sometimes when talking about racism within the medical system, it gets a bit wishy-washy. People are like, you're just assuming that it happens because of race, and there's no proof that that's the reason why they acted that way. But really, like, there's no fight against it. You can read this book and there's nothing you can say that is racism in a pure form. It's mistreatment. No one should be treated that way. And it made me angry and it made me upset. And I was just impressed to kind of also hear about her writing journey. Malorie Blackman has an amazing writing journey in terms of, it was nice to see, because I've read so many of her books, that I now better understand how she came to write those books and why she wrote those books. But it's just amazing to see anger being such a fuel to her writing, and I think that's really important. And it was insightful to see where Noughts and Crosses came from. It was insightful to see where Boys Don't Cry and Pig-Hearted Boy came from. A really important memoir, and I love the way it was written. It was written in classic Malorie Blackman style. This is her all over. It's her stamp. It's her way of writing, and I loved it. April, I finished a big book. I've been trying to read some big books this year, and I did it. I read A Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela. So this is his journey, his memoir about his experiences of fighting apartheid in South Africa. Nelson Mandela has a really big story. He was imprisoned for his activism for several years, and I think if you want to just learn more about apartheid in South Africa and the changes and effect that he has made on so many people's lives, it's well worth reading this book. And I have to say, even though this book is chunky monkey, it's well worth reading, and it actually reads quite quickly because it's very readable and very well written. But do go in knowing that it is a political memoir. Like, you've got to get your head around the politics in this. And I think it was insightful to me because of the fact that you do really hear a lot about the American political state and the UK, British political state, especially me living in the UK, and you don't get to always hear about other countries and how politics are managed and what their political situations are. So while this is historical and looking at South Africa back then, I feel like I was learning a lot about what the political setup is there, how apartheid was made to thrive, the things that people did to really quash the revolution and the way that they fought back. And Nelson Mandela manages to write this very, very candidly. Like, even though it's political and I'm talking about getting my head around some of the political situations, he explains everything in a way in which me, who has no knowledge or deep sense of South African history, managed to understand everything, managed to process it and learn it within this book. I also think Nelson Mandela writes in a way that's very reflective, and he is honest, and I appreciated that. When it comes to things like fighting for your rights, you do have to give up certain things, and he talks about the toll that being imprisoned for so long had on his wife, had on his family, had on his other commitments that weren't just to the political and revolutionary struggle. And while his fight for rights is so important and so needed, you can see what falls to the wayside, and he's not afraid to say, yes, I failed in this respect and that respect, and yes, I did have some mindsets that probably weren't the healthiest in terms of like political statements, and sometimes I did things that I probably shouldn't have. And he manages to admit that in his memoir, and I really, really appreciated getting to see those things admitted, because I think it's all too easy to focus on the grand things that you do in terms of memoirs like this, but he keeps it very real. he keeps it very real. Reading this memoir has made me very interested in reading Winnie Mandela's memoir, just because you can see her kind of in the background of this one, and I wonder what things were really like on her side of the story. And yeah, it was just, I just think it was a really good read in terms of I've learned so much, and that's ultimately what you want to do when you read non-fiction. You want to take it away, you want to learn, and I'm having such a good time educating myself through books lately. Speaking of non-fiction and the Disability Readathon, I read Disability Visibility, which is edited by Alice Wong, but it's actually by multiple authors. It's an essay collection where lots of different disabled people have been invited to write and talk about their disability or something to do with their life and disability. So maybe not their disability in particular. I loved this. I gave this 5 stars and it's a new favourite. I thought this was actually a fantastic collection. All of the essays are very, very well written, and all of them help me just learn something new or see a new experience. I don't think you need to learn something new with every essay you read. I will say learn about a new experience. It covers a wealth, a plethora of disabilities, because of course disability is such a all-encompassing term, and you get to see so many different types of disabilities, but you also get to see so many different experiences. You get to hear from Black disabled people, queer disabled people, Muslim disabled people, you get to hear about from disabled parents, you get to hear about from people who are disabled and into fashion, you get to hear about an everyday working disabled person. There are just so many different facets of being disabled that you don't think of from the top of your head. So it was kind of nice to just hear from all of these different voices, see some of the stories that they had to tell me. Some of them were truly disgusting in nature, some of them kind of horrified me from the way that they were treated. Felt emotional because some of these are hopeful, some of these have these moments that are so uplifting and heartwarming and wholesome that I was like, yes, this is what we want more of. So it definitely, I went through a whole range of emotions while reading this essay collection. I don't think I can tell you much more than this, but this is again one of those ones that I just want to recommend to everyone, and I think reading 1 or 2 of these essays could be essential reading. I think even in schools or just like parents with children, or just, yeah, I just think there's really something in there for everyone. Okay, so we're going to talk about another book that really disappointed me, and that is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. This is a proof copy, so the cover doesn't show the cover, but this is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. I keep trying to be a thriller reader, and I'm just not, and I need to let it go. I need to let it go. Someone tell me to stop trying to read the thrillers. So I wanted to read this one in particular because it's kind of a riff off of And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, which is one of my favourite murder mystery books. So of course when people harken back to that, I'm going to read it. So we follow the Darker family. There's a Nan who's really rich. She's made a lot of money off of writing this book, and she invites everyone to her house, which is on this like isolated island, to celebrate her birthday. And the family haven't been all together for several years because they don't get along, and the tide goes out or in. The tide does something where you can't cross anymore. So the tide does its thing, and by the time the next day when the tide comes either in or out, lots of people are dead. Everyone's supposed to be dead. Yeah, so it's kind of And Then There Were None, but like a modern retelling of it in some ways. And what can I say? I'm so disappointed. I wasn't loving it, but I was enjoying it for the most part. I was merrily reading along. The suspense wasn't grabbing me in a way in which I needed to keep turning the pages, but I was happy to turn those pages. The writing wasn't amazing or unique, but I was happy to read it. And the mystery was unfolding, and I didn't know who done it. And the plot twist of this one was just so disappointing. I just hate these kind of plot twists. Like, I can't explain it because I don't want to give it away, but it's in the nature of the other Black girl. Just like, why would you do that at the end? Why would you do that? It feels like a cop-out. And when it gets to a cop-out like that, it kind of ruins the impact of everything that's previously followed in the story. I will say the one thing I did like about it was that the family weren't friends. I kind of liked the fact that it was flashing back to the times that they had in the past and the tensions that were created. I liked that element to it, but it was just like really a disappointing mystery, a disappointing thriller, and so much hinges on the plot twist when it comes to thriller mysteries, and this one just did not deliver. It really let me down. I feel like a parent who's disappointed in their child right now. Right, let's move on to bigger and brighter things. I'm so excited to tell you about Project Nought by Chelsey and Furedi, because I gave this one 5 stars and it became a new favourite, and I had the best time reading this graphic novel. It was everything I wanted. So in this one, set in a futuristic world where time travel exists, and there's a school program in the future where they want to teach their children about history, and what they do is they pull people from history to kind of partner with them and have a like buddy system for like 2 weeks, and then they send those people back, and that's how the teenagers learn about history. And we're following our main character, and he's one of the boys who gets pulled from history into the present day storyline. He gets buddied with the other main character that we see here, but maybe there's something more sinister to the technology that is used for this time traveling than people think. It was fantastic. I was immediately captured by the main character that we follow, Ren. I loved him. He was really like not the person who you would expect to have as a main character. He was really like this, if you think of a traditional story, he was the secondary character kind of person, but he gets his own story and he gets to be the main character in this one, and I loved that. I loved that he didn't want to be the one making changes. I loved that he was just wanting to be happy and wanting to exist, but he didn't want to make a fuss. He didn't want to be in the spotlight necessarily. Not that he would push it away like a reluctant hero, but he also he was just so normal. He was just so normal and realistic, and I like that about him. I think the storylines in this were just so nice. So we've got their storyline together and maybe a bit of romance between them, but you've also got these 2 side characters, one of whom is non-binary and one of whom is a woman, and they have their own storyline and their own journey, and the trajectory of how their relationship is put into parallel with this one was really nice, and I think it really worked and was really effective. But it also gave the story scope and room to talk about queerness and talk about friendships and talk about romances in a very down-to-earth, realistic way. The representation in this is really good. We're in the future, and in the future queer relationships and identities are normalized. We've got like a wheelchair user main character, and there's like no ableism whatsoever. Everything is just normalized, racism normalized, and I loved seeing that. I think that's where we want to be in the future, so it's nice to see that drawn. The artwork really got to me. This is a proof copy, so it's not in color, but I really want to reread it in color again because the story is just so good. And in terms of like the science fiction-y elements to it, the time travel elements to it, it's done so well. It's really done so well. As someone who loves a good time travel story, who loves a good sci-fi kind of conspiracy with technology and everything, I think it worked really well in this. And I think that's why I love this graphic novel so much, because it manages to have a really interesting and unexpected plot with a lot of depth to it, while also having characters who show really good development and whose stories echo each other, while also having really funny, entertaining, silly moments in the midst of it. It had time for those everyday pitfalls and everyday jokes between the characters too. So it's just one of those graphic novels that to me had it all, with very good artwork too, and I really recommend it, and I hope it becomes even more popular and that everyone loves it. I think it is based on a webcomic, and I do think the books that are based on webcomics that turn into real books do really well. Oh my gosh, we got another one. Fireborn, Phoenix and the Frost Palace by Aisling Fowler. 5 stars, new favourite. This is shaping up to be one of my favourite middle grade series of all time as well. So this is the second book in the series. I read Fireborn by Aisling Fowler last year, which is the first one, and I won't tell you the plot of this one because it relates, but in the first one you follow 12. She joins this kind of boarding school where you have to leave your whole life behind you in order to become a really well-trained fighter. So she decides to do that, and her friend who's at that school with her gets kidnapped, so she goes on an adventure quest with some teammates to go and rescue her. And it's very magical. They face like different obstacles on the way, but because of the way that last book ended, there's a villain character, or characters I should say, and in this one those villain characters are back. They're here to threaten something, and our character, who we've been following in the first book, needs to go to an entirely different world and setting, a bit of a frosty one as you might have gathered from the title, to fight against that villain. And this one was so interesting because I spent the whole time thinking I knew what was up, but I did not know what was up. And I think that's what happened with the last book as well. Like, you as an adult reader think you can tell all the twists and turns because you're an adult reader, and Ashton Fowler is like, no honey, I'm still gonna manage to surprise you, and I was here for it. I think all of the characters that we met last time, they grow even more, they develop even more in this one, especially Phoenix as a main character. I just loved seeing her development in this, and the way that the plot is interwoven into her character development. And I love when that happens, when the plot and the twists that are happening are essential to how the character grows. Can't really say any more, but that was part of this. We meet some new secondary characters and all of them felt very realistic, and seeing those bonds like threaten the old ones but make way for new ones was really well balanced. The world building was immaculate. I like that we were in one setting for the first book, and then in the second book we're going to a very different setting, so you get to fall into and be immersed and introduced into a new world all over again. The way in which the lore around magic is being built and steadily growing throughout the book is really, really well done, and it has elements of found family now, because the friendships that were forming in the first book are strengthened in this one, and they all kind of have their roles within the group, and I enjoyed seeing their dynamic. It made me smile, even though I do think these books are plot heavy and I'm naturally a character driven reader. It still manages to bring that sense of character. It still has moments which make me laugh, which entertain me, because they get to have those found family happy moments. Children, that's what they are, even while they're having these adventures and fighting monsters, and all of those big decisions need to be made too. I think if you've read the series, Six is probably my favourite character. I really love him. I think he's lovely. I love that he is kind of like the mum of the group and looking out for everyone, but also just trying to hold it together. And I love how tied they all are to their weapons. It's a big book for middle grade, and I raced through it and it didn't feel long at all. I had a really good time with this. Can't wait until the third book comes out. I'm so excited. And then last but not least, I read To My Sisters by Renee, Kapuku and Courtney, Daniella, Boateng. And this is a guide to building lifelong friendships. This is essentially a self-help book for people who want to deepen their friendships, find new friendships, and better understand what they are like as a friend to other people. And I think I mentioned when I hauled this one, I don't actually think it's a book that I necessarily need. I feel like I have a good grip on who I am in a friendship and how I am different in different friendships, and I've got enough friends. I don't think I'm looking for more, but I sometimes make more anyway. But I'm happy with my friendships. So reading this was more so just to kind of see, or to be curious, and I did enjoy it. I do think if you're someone who's struggling to make friendships, or you want to better set boundaries or better understand how you can be a good friend to others, or see what kind of friends you need in your life, this is such a good one to read. I really resonated with everything it was saying, and it just felt very true to what friendships are like and what it means to kind of find those deeper friendships, those deeper lifelong friendships that people seem to pursue. And I know the facts about how in our generation are lonelier than ever, and I think this book kind of delves into why that is and what we can do to kind of change that, to impact that. And it's not a guarantee that you read this book and you're going to go and make a million friends, but it's a book where you can read it and better understand yourself. And I think those kind of things always help you. If you understand yourself, if you understand your personality and your habits, it only makes you open to being more compatible to other people. So yes, it was very well written. I really liked things that they talked about. I can see how it came from a podcast into this book, and it was a good read. It was a good read. And there you have it. Those are all the books that I read in the month of April. As you can see, I had quite a few new favourites, but I also had some lows there amongst my highs. Please let me know in the comment section down below, what was the last book that you read? What did you think of it? Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!